with all the Gen AI hype going on, how can industry leaders actually ensure that they and their organizations and industries are solving real problems and not just say chasing shiny tech?
While Gen AI is more conversational, machine learning is very predictive in nature. So the technology is an afterthought. We would really, as practitioners, sit with you to understand what is the right technology to solve your problem. For all that we know, a simple automation can solve your problem.
How do you guys measure impact, not just on the basis of say cost saving or efficiency, but also proper on ground change?
We at Accenture measure impact focusing on three areas: experience, agility, and growth. And we reinvent ourselves by asking, what did we improve? What did we unlock? And who did we elevate?
In this episode of Simulated Reality, we explore what it truly means to move from insight to impact in the age of generative AI. As organizations rush to embrace AI and emerging technologies, the real challenge isn't experimentation, it's execution and continuous, responsible, human-led reinvention. To unpack how this very reinvention becomes real, we are joined by Vijay Lakshmi, Managing Director at Accenture, and Smita Ganesh, Managing Director AI at Accenture. This conversation will dive into the playbook for value-driven reinvention powered by technology, trust, and talent. So, let's begin. Welcome to another episode of Simulated Reality. We are in this wonderful location. That is the Accenture office here in Bangalore, Kormangala. And we have two absolute industry leaders here with us. We have Smita and Vijay Lakshmi, who has very sweetly told me that I should call her Viji. So Viji and Smita, good morning. How are you guys doing?
Good morning. Awesome. Happy to be here.
Lovely to have you here. Viji, how are you doing?
Feeling great. It's a good day.
So good start to the day. I want to start with you, Smita. We were having this discussion before we started rolling, where you were saying that you've been here at Accenture for 8 months, right? And you said those 8 months have felt like a lot of years of work and a lot of years of both personal growth and team growth. Tell us a little about the experience through the 8 months.
Yeah. So I would say the 8-month journey is like somebody on steroids, right?
Oh, wow.
So the kind of exposure that you get to here is immense. And one thing that I'm so glad about, the way in which Accenture operates is it's an early adopter to every technology on planet, I would say. So just after something is released, there's always, a team that gathers together and start identifying how should we really start adopting to this technology. And the ways in which we do this is we don't just serve our customers, right? So we also have our internal teams where we can try, test, vet the technology out and then see, how impactful this is and what are the feasibilities of this technology. So we try something on ourselves first before proposing it to the customers. So that's what I really like about, working here and getting into faster adoption to multiple things and changing context. Oh my God, it's like every minute you change the context. At one point of time you speak with sales and marketing, and another point of time you speak to the team and discuss on the invested development of the models or integration architectures, and at other point you start talking about some of the principles that we need to adopt in terms of moving this technology further, right? And another point of time with the research lab. So variety, magnanimity of the entire ecosystem here is profound, I would say.
Vijay, I want to ask you, because exact opposite experience, 15 years at Accenture. My God, 15 years of experience, it must be difficult to put together in a short answer. But tell us how it's been like.
I never felt it's too long because each and every role I played throughout this journey in Accenture, it's completely diverse. Right from technology or the client we handle or the nature of work I embark in, it's always very different from each other. So it's always, I would say, every new role I landed gave me an opportunity to learn a lot of things in terms of new technology and then client specifics and all. So with that said, I never felt it's too long. And every day we are learning. The reason is, as Smita said, it's a very diverse environment where we get to work with multiple people at one point in time, especially the engagement or the portfolio where I'm managing. It comprises of nearly about 250 cloud platform we are managing, right? That's a huge, and there's a lot of complexity. And every day we need to be on the war footing to ensure that our clients are happy, and their platforms are healthy. So with that said, yeah, so it's always engaging, I would say. Every day is it's a new day for us to learn new things and work with multiple clients. It's an amazing journey, I would say.
That's great to hear. Smita, you mentioned something in your first answer itself, that whenever there's a new tech, there's a new technology, there's a new tool which is being talked about across the tech and AI world, Accenture is working on that from before that itself. Tell us that the Gen AI boom happened across the country. We are in mid 2025 now, so about 2.5 years back. But Accenture had been working with Gen AI from before that itself. Tell us a little about that. In which ways was Accenture using Gen AI much before the boom happened?
Okay. So prior to the Gen AI boom, what we called the technology was more invested in terms of natural language processing, and we utilized something called as deep learning, where we had a neural network kind of an architecture, right? So Gen AI is a new word coined, I would say, because after the evolution of Chat GPT of sorts, the executive community of the world got excited because they could really see what a technology can do in terms of the human like conversations, right? But for technologists like us, we were always handling it in terms of the natural language processing, the natural language generation kind of thing, and all of that. But putting an application interface in front of the technology and democratizing the technology is what gave so much of a space for the executives to start with some of these strategic initiatives. Because from my experience, what I feel is these technologies have to be driven from the top, right? Because it requires a huge investment and the talent force where we have to reinvent as well. So we can do only so much by doing things from the bottom, by upskilling, reskilling, and putting a vision together. But to make it a reality, it should always be driven from the top, I would feel, right? So in the space of machine learning, prior to the Gen AI days, and even today, the machine learning is not going to go anywhere, because that's the principles, right? Like the statistics, machine learning. So just to give you an example, I came to this field before the data science word was coined, and statistics was not the most sexiest at that point of time, right? You hardly found people with statistics sitting next to you in the class or a full room. But that's not the point today, right? So people have a realization of what power these statistics and machine learning can bring to the world. So long story short, I say that every organizations did adopt the natural language processing, which is a little more advanced, we call as Gen AI, which is backed by the deep learning technologies itself. So what happened basically in Gen AI? Major heavy lifting is done by a few of the companies, like the OpenAI, like the Googles of the world, like the Anthropics, right? We are the mere users of that models. So no more we sit and develop these humongous models, but we actually adopt to the models, which is another way of getting into a growing space and bringing in more innovation, I would say. So here now what is more focus is bringing an architecture together where we can integrate all of these, right? So Gen AI is not a whole and soul new domain, I would say. In multiple scenarios, we were using the language as an enabler for the technology. Now it has taken the center stage after we saw the impact that it could create, and human experience has become the center of a lot of things today, right? And conversation is the key part of the human experience. Therefore, the Gen AI has taken the center stage, and I would say, I think we are proud that we are early adopters of Gen AI within Accenture.
Absolutely. You mentioned reinvent in your answer itself. Now, I've spoken to so many industry leaders, and they have said as well that when it comes to the tech and AI world, with Gen AI happening since the last 2-3 years and more, it is quite literally reinventing itself by the month. And that is why for industries and firms and in companies, it is very important to reinvent as well. And when it comes to reinvention, there was a major key theme during Davos that was making reinvention real. So what does this actually mean inside an organization?
I think this is a great question, and we are living by this keyword called reinvention day in and day out within Accenture, right? So we have had multiple engagements with our clients on the Gen AI, I would say, the journey, right? About 2000 of our communication with the clients or the projects that we have actually impacted through is with GenAI. The 2000 projects since the time of its inception within the GenAI. And not just that, we have also kind of interacted with 3000 plus executives to understand how can we make this technology real and not just keep it at a hype cycle, right? So what we learned from this is there are 5 imperatives that emerge for adopting this technology and making it a value driven, right? So the first imperative out of this is lead with value. I'm not doing this because I'm kind of feeling left out in the game or I have a peer pressure, right? It's not that. I do see a value in adopting this technology. And can you really quote that value? Do you have a KPI to start and drive towards that KPI when you want to adopt to this technology, right? It's not because it's cool, but it's actually bringing in a process transformation within the organization. Now I can handle huge amount of workflows through some of the agentic architecture, which was never a reality before. All the decision making is happening through this technology right now, right? And the second imperative is talent. So we cannot do everything by technology unless we have skilled people, right? And the third imperative is driving through responsible AI. So when all of these technologies comes into the forefront, how am I responsibly using it to make sure we are not marginalizing the society, right? That is the third imperative. And the fourth imperative is reinvention. Like you said, the technology is reinventing itself. So what does that actually mean? As I start adopting to the technology, I am knowing more nuances of how to expand this technology further, right? So now agentic AI was never in play. It was only Gen AI for quite some time, right? Now, how can I make it very autonomous is agentic AI, right? That is another reinvention in the technology. So all of these imperatives put together, when we actually look at the statistics, right? The organizations who follow these, and another imperative is the cognitive brain, as we popularly call us, right? The knowledge brain. So we marry the enterprise data with the SME knowledge together, vectorize it, keep it in the sort of a consumable pattern for a large language model. So these 5 imperatives together make an organization ready for enterprise implementation, right? We have seen the ones who are actually navigating through these 5 imperatives are 2.5 times more likely to bring in enterprise level transformations. So how powerful this technology is completely depends on how adaptable you are to these 5 imperatives to move out of the siloed way of doing your things versus looking at a 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet level broader perspective and embracing the technology through these imperatives.
Absolutely. Vijay, I want to ask you, when it comes to organizations reinventing themselves, why do so many efforts get stalled after the pilot phase itself? What is missing?
So the missing link is not the technology, not the budget. It's more human and foundational. What is exactly is its change capability. Our research says nearly about 95% of the organization who has underwent a major transformation in multiple times in the last few years, but only 30% of them feel really confident about their ability to manage the change effectively. So this underscores that there is a huge gap between how the change is initiated versus how it is spread across their enterprise over the period of time, right? So in order to address this gap, Accenture has introduced a blueprint called Change Capability Quotient.
Change capability quotient.
Quotient, yes. So what it comprises of, it's a basically a 6 practices which will help in scaling and managing to deploy the enterprise level changes very quickly. What is making it more powerful is the models of these is comes with a perfect blend of human led leadership and data driven decision making and also strategic use of GenAI and technology. So enterprise who embrace these models will definitely see a shift in the way they reinvent themselves at scale. So like what we see is change is not a moment, it's a muscle, right? So enterprise need to bring in their people, process and leadership muscle to thrive it through with the perfect blend of budget, and then investment across talent and technology. Yeah.
Say, what are some of the practical examples of business functions that have truly been able to be reinvented when it comes to organizations who have been able to adapt it properly? Would it be marketing, supply chain, customer service? Which are the ones?
So basically, Accenture has got a very promising multiple transformation stories, as we were talking earlier, right? We started already helping our enterprise clients with multiple implementation of GenAI solutions by managing their global functions as well as the business functions across all the industries. So just to name a few is when we talk about marketing, where we implemented personalized content creation for our clients, which helps to reduce the effort spent for the content creation and making it more faster for the employee experience and engagement experience for the client, so by nearly about 40%. When we talk about supply chain industry, one of the largest retailer who leveraged our solution, which is based out of GenAI related reinvention, they were able to make a difference in achieving their stockout scenarios reduced by 30%.
Wow.
And also their sustainability were improved because of the smarter AI solutions, which helped in the smarter forecasts. And when we talk about customer services, we are already seeing that AI is already replacing human-centric call centers, and we are seeing now it is agentic driven contact centers, right? And where the AI is managing most of the tasks, repetitive tasks, and also some of the repetitive issues, it is able to manage it very well. And where the human agents are being engaged is only those areas where high touch and also the high complex issues where human value is more important. So we are not limited there. So recently we have launched AI Refinery for Industries, covering a platform to cover all the 12 industry use cases, embracing the agentic AI approach, which will help in enterprises to embrace the AI adoption faster, quicker, and bring in more productivity. And we are also leveraging the NVIDIA platform, which is making faster deployment and derive more value for the client.
It's great to hear. Exciting times ahead, especially through Accenture. Smita, I want to ask you, you have been working in the AI field long before it became cool, or as you said in your first answer, before it became sexy. So you've worked with so many organizations who are making big bets on AI before, now Gen AI. Tell us what distinguishes those organizations who are being able to create real impact from those who are still struggling to be able to make real impact.
So adopting to this technology is not like something very academic, right? So I just spoke about the 5 imperatives. And I just also mentioned that, the companies who embrace these 5 imperatives are 2.5 times more likely to drive the enterprise level solutions, right? So what is the differentiating factors that we are seeing is, what is the risk appetite for the organization? Are they willing to fail fast? And is the investment driven by the value? And do you have the right infrastructure to support all the developments that you're doing, right? And what is the investment that you're bringing in to upskill, reskill, re-envision your talent ecosystem itself, right? So all of these put together with the risk appetite that I'm able to consume. When I say consuming the risk appetite, it's not like, blindly I would say, hey, I would want to invest in this no matter what, and let me see what the risk is. That's not what it is, right? So I know what risks that I may be able to encounter and go back and try and see if I can put some guardrails, mitigate the risk through bringing in the responsible AI into the picture, right? So how do I answer my regulatory audits while doing all of these? So for example, when the cloud infrastructures came in, right? The regulated industries such as healthcare and banking and financial services were late adapters, because there is still a gray line between which data I can actually call as PII versus not, what data I can actually put it to the cloud versus what I'm not definitely okay to put it to the cloud, things like that, right? Now there is a huge reinvestment opportunity in terms of, like Vijay said, NVIDIA itself, right? So we have an NVIDIA business group which was like, quickly created. That's what I see, faster adoption from Accenture, right? So we quickly created the NVIDIA business group and said that, hey, you're not limited by, the cloud infrastructure. You can always take it on-prem as well. NVIDIA historically was just, an infrastructure provider. It's not the case anymore, right? So we have NIMS and NEMO who is enabling us to develop the models at a faster pace, tune our models at a faster pace. So take the advantage of these ecosystems to progress faster. Now we don't have anything to deter the development just because you cannot port your data to the cloud. Also now, even if I want to port my data to the cloud, we are completely aware of how to harden the cloud, how to secure my data. Even if it is a private data, there are different mechanisms in which I can contain the data within the boundaries of the cloud through the VPCs and whatnot, right? Okay, so referring back to your question, plugging back those 5 imperatives and adopting to the technology in multiple different ways. Statistically, it has been proven that the early adapters and the fail fast mechanism and the risk takers are the ones who are the fast movers in terms of this technology.
Absolutely. You mentioned value in your answer. I want to ask you, because Accenture often talks about value-led reinvention. What are some of the mindset requires to make sure that this happens? The mindset shift that can enable this kind of value-led reinvention.
So it requires a lot of mindset shift. When we talk about that, the first one is stop thinking in silos. What we see is many of our business stakeholders always focus on isolated projects, wherein the value-led reinvention requires an end-to-end shift across the entire enterprise to drive the outcome that really matters for the people, for the customer, for the stakeholders, and to the society. So the second one is we should not be thinking about cost as an expense, rather it's a value creation, right? So business should focus on their investment not as an expense, and then treat that as a value driver for growth, responsibility, and adaptability. And third one is the talent should be kept in the heart of the journey, while the people are and talent are the crucial part of the reinvention. We need to ensure that they are not the afterthought. It is in, day out, on daily basis, right? And fourth one is how to embrace the change gracefully and reinvent holistically, right? So bring in your people and process and your leadership to drive it through for you to achieve the real reinvention which the enterprise looks for.
That's a great answer, actually, Vijay. Smita, I want to ask you, with all the AI hype going on and all the Gen AI hype going on, a lot of industry leaders also say that a lot of it is actually happening on ground and in companies and industries, but a major part of it is hype as well.
Yeah.
So with all the Gen AI hype going on, how can industry leaders actually ensure that they and their organizations and industries are solving real problems and not just say chasing shiny tech?
I think that's a great question, right? So when we start our engagement with the clients as well, we start asking, hey, start with the problem, not with the technology, right? So the technology is an afterthought. We would really, as practitioners, sit with you to understand what is the right technology to solve your problem. For all that we know, a simple automation can solve your problem with low level of latency and bringing things together and things like that, right? So automation is going to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. And machine learning, our random forest, XGBoost, all of them are still going to stay because they are very predictive in nature. While Gen AI is more conversational, machine learning is very predictive in nature. So let's start with a problem statement. Forget about the technology. Leave it to us and we will make sure you adopt to the right technology to solve your problem, right? So that's the first thing that we start with. And the second thing is, ensure you have data readiness within the organization, right? Somebody would come and say, I have enormous data that is available. But for the problem that you have, do you have the right data even to solve that, right? Otherwise, put a structure, go collect the data, and then let's solve the problem, right? Every problem is solvable as long as we have an enablement. So create the data enablement for your organization. Now, let's say, I identified one of the technology to be a best suited technology, which is on still the high platform, right? So how do I really pilot on the technology to understand the feasibility of the technology itself? Because for the problems that I want to solve for you, probably you don't have the right infrastructure, or the technology is not matured enough. Or take an example within the contact center where we want a speech to speech kind of a modulation, right? Can I bring empathy through a voice bot itself, right? And today there are ecosystems who are enabling the voice biometric, right? So probably you want to adopt to all that which is cool in the organization, but is there a scalability of that technology? Because a lot of things may be just an idea, try and test out, let us put it on a platform, see if there is a requirement from the customer, is there a real use case kind of a thing, right? So can we really pilot it and also give it to the users, right? The technology can be the best in itself, but unless it is adopted, it's not driving value, right? So how do I create adoption is a big change management process, right? And do people even want this technology? Certain times there will not be an awareness of what technology can bring. Certain times change management is very important, because there are a lot of SMEs who still rightfully think that they could do a better job when compared to a technology. But what we suggest is have an assist, right? I'm not going to replace you, but this technology is going to augment everything that you're going to do and free out a lot of grunt work out of you, right? So all of these have to come together to make sure that you are addressing the real problem within the organization and not just chasing the hype. And mind you, these technologies are not inexpensive, they come at a cost. So if you really want to invest in this technology, you want to see a value that is deriving out of that technology, right? And how soon they can hit the books is also important, because a lot of times we start with an estimated value, right? That looks really fantastic, but when actual adoption is not happening, everything that we delivered is not going to scale. And if people are not going to adopt, there's no point in the investment that we have done. So it's kind of always a balance between adopting to the new technology and making sure people adopt, or doing an estimate whether or not this technology is the right technology to create an adoption. So I think that mindset has to be very important. And in our discussion, we say that, hey, there is a hub and spoke model, right? So create a centralized atmosphere like a COE who will bring these technologies together and, try and see the feasibility, do a reinvention, cut it by the domain across the CGs and things like that, and give you something to consume. And you start scaling from there, right? So this is the hub and spoke model that we will always, propose to our clients. And we see that this is working pretty well.
You mentioned, you gave the example of the voice bots and the voice biometric as well. Now, there's also the extremely important angle of the safety concern behind that, isn't it? Because when it comes to voice biometric, a lot of the times the platforms that you're trying to access to, they might have banking information, financial information. Clients might ask for that to be rolled out ASAP. But when it comes to you guys, you all also have to make sure that again, it's not just a shiny tech, but it's also something that is completely safe when it comes to the user base. How important is that, finding that balance also?
Fantastic question, I would say, right? So adopting to technology is one thing. Putting guardrails to make sure that this democratized technology is used within the right boundaries is another thing, right? So you must have heard a lot of inventions earlier through the big ecosystems which came in, and we had multiple voice bots and we democratized and people started training them back and the bots going rogue, right? So how do I make sure, I still contain the bots within the guardrails become important. So, thinking from an agentic perspective itself, we can create agents who will enforce these guardrails, like NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA has a mechanism to bring in those guardrails together itself. And they're set of functions. We will say, hey, your question should not go beyond this intent boundary. Okay, let's say, this bot is designed for enrollment and enrollment alone in any organization, right? So somebody comes and asks, just to be polite, what is the capital of Australia, right? And then the bot would come back and say, hey, you know what? I am not trained for this intent. I'm sorry, I cannot answer. So these are the guardrails in terms of the parameters that you need to set for the technology not to go beyond the intent boundary. And there are multiple ways of doing this, right? So we have made sure those parameters are captured, coded, embedded, tested enough, and we feel the technology is safe.
Absolutely. I know the answer to that question. It's Canberra. And just to get it in simple words, so basically to ensure that an AI is not going rogue, even that ensuring is being done by an agentic AI itself.
It could be agentic or just a bunch of program. I just brought in an example of agentic because now the whole world is talking about agentic to make everything very autonomous, right? So you can have an agentic paired with that. What actually is agentic? You code under the agent and say that, hey, as and when the question comes in, you have to be, kicked in to validate the question. Only then I would progress to my next agent to get the answers for this, right? So the first level of guardrail is the validation, which we always need to do.
Absolutely. Vijay, now when it comes to you, we have discussed this before. The world, in terms of the AI technology, is moving so fast, so rapidly. But culture of organizations are often at one static point. They often sometimes lag behind as well. So how do you get your people ready for continuous reinvention when it comes to the organizations?
Yeah. So the continuous reinvention is possible only if the people are ready, right? To answer your question, how do we make our people ready, right? So bringing the mindset of perpetual learning, right? So moving away from the project-based change, learning as part of the culture, and it happens on a continuous manner. Second point is, how do we make it as a part of journey, as part of the workflow of their entire delivery life cycle, right? So what we make it is, so we moved away, Accenture has moved away from the annual or the regular training programs. We started introducing a bite-sized real-time learning, exactly what they need to know in order to manage their portfolio, right? So this helps in ensuring that the people are always ready with the latest and greatest technology to move forward and then bring the future ready skills in a rapid manner. Third one is learn from the front. So our executives started embracing the new technology by undergoing their own trainings and then experimenting AI, getting them certified, setting the tone for the enterprise people. So lastly, celebrate the curiosity. Give them the space to experiment and then reward the adaptability, and also give them a space to fail fast and learn fast. So this way they will be ready to learn quickly and then also able to face the delivery challenges very quickly. Culture is your reinvention, and make it faster and quicker with your everyday learning as a culture to make it across at the enterprise. So when I talk about that, it's a continuous embracing of the learning is very crucial. As you said, when the technology is moving fast, we also make our people to move fast with the learning, the new technology, and having the future ready skills faster, right? With the right mindset and people and leadership, you can make people as your biggest competitive advantage.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. Pretty much kind of shows the culture at Accenture as well. I want to ask you, Smita, you mentioned about agentic AI as to what they are. Now, here on our channel, AIM TV itself, we have this IP called Front Page. We make all the daily news and updates from the world of AI in tech. And so many of those news pieces are on AI agents because of, the way they are being talked about, and they're being used in industrial cases right now as well. So if in the and often in those videos, one of the constant questions that we get is, what exactly is agentic AI? What exactly is an AI agent? So if in the simplest of terms, say if you have to explain to a layperson, a class 10 student, what will be your answer? What exactly is an AI agent?
Good. I love this question because we do this with a lot of our customers as well to decipher this better, right? You can call many terms, but what do they actually mean becomes very important. At Accenture, we have a few of our, fantastic leaders written a paper about it. And the way in which we have devised our agentic AI is like a beehive. right?
Oh.
So imagine it like a hive mindset. That's what the paper is about. You can go back and refer. So how do we really categorize this agentic AI is in terms of three hierarchies, right? So what happens in an actual beehive? You have the drone bees at the top who is looking at every function that is happening within their group, right? And then you have the queen bees at the middle who are actually the decision makers. They would say people to go right, left, collect, whatever, right? So they are the decision makers. We call them as super agents. The one at the top who is actually looking at the entire orchestration, we call them as orchestrators, right? And the one at the bottom are the real guys who actually does the work, right? So we call them as worker bees. So, and these worker bees are the subset of the agents who are reusable. I can use the summarization agent in an underwriting case or in a claims case or in a telecom where I need to give a summary of the expenses or the bills of that customer, right? So, agentic architecture, this is the whole vision of the agentic architecture, right? So, the orchestrator would, there's a question coming from the customer per se, and the question is deciphered in terms of the intent by the orchestrator. And once the intent is understood, it is passed on to the super agents. And the super agents are configured based on the intent. Hey, if it is an intent based on a claim, let the super agent one take it. If the intent is based on, let's say, a responsible metric, the super agent two would take it, right? So now the super agent is like a low code, no code kind of a thing, right? So they have a bunch of classes and bunch of function calling and things like that to keep it simple. And they would be configured as to which worker bees or the worker agents to be called, right? So let's say a summarization need to be done, right? And this comes to the super agent tree, and the decision making is done saying that, hey, the worker B3 is going to help me in the summarization. So the real coding or the actual concept is coded on the worker agent, right? So the worker agent is activated by the super agent based on the intent which is flowing across the orchestrator to the super agent flow, and then the job gets done. And there has to be handshake between the worker bees, right? To do the summarization, I need to get the data collected. So there is a data collection agent. So this agent goes and looks at the data sources and collect the right data for the intent, not everything, right? Right data for the intent. And there's a transformation agent who takes the data from the data collected agent and does all the transformation, because data cannot be consumed raw, right? So this does the transformation. And there's a research agent who goes back and checks the web and says that, hey, I looked at the competitor data and this is what is important for your campaign, blah, blah, blah. That comes and gives another portion of the data. There's an analyst who is an agent again, who comes and analyzes the data, right? And then there is a final brief agent who writes the insights of what I collected, right? So this is an entire workflow that I kind of demonstrated to you, which we can do through agentic AI. See, earlier we had microservices, right? Each these utility agents are microservices, the worker bees, what we call, right? You just configure each of these to do a particular task. But what is agentic AI is doing? It is perceiving the environment through concepts, intents, right? It's no more syntactic, it's also semantic. Syntactic, semantic working together here, right? So once the intent is captured, there is a decision making layer as well. That is where the autonomy is bringing in, right? Earlier it was human in the loop. The
Correct.
human used to do a lot of things themselves. Now it is human on the loop. So once the job is done, there's always a human who comes and looks at your brief, who comes and looks at your narrative, and who comes and says, hey, whether or not I can pass this invoice based on all the data you have given. Because that autonomy, that decision making of the human, we don't want to take it away, because that is a subject matter expertise which is coming in, right? In a business which is low risk, such as marketing, you can always make it fully autonomous, where still a complete brief has to be read by a human before launching a campaign. But in a payment ecosystem, you might have multiple humans on the loop, right? Earlier the payments used to be handled by many verticals, at least 10 touches, 20 touches for a given invoice. Now you can easily live with 2 or 3 touch, or even no touch. There's a final validation before which an account payable happens, right? So this entire workflow orchestration is done by an agentic AI, which has a logical reasoning, perceives the environment, and also an episodic memory here, right? So like me and you are conversing, Let's say this is a contact center, right? You come back and say, hey, I have this problem. The fact that somebody is coming to a contact center means we already lost them, right? So they have to go through the IVR abyss and whatnot. +1 for this, +2 for this, and then you're a long time on the call and you lose the person at the end of it. There's a call disconnection, right? So too many episodes happen here, which is not very customer centric. That means the experience is at very bad taste in this, right? With the agentic AI in place, you're immediately getting an assistance with respect to the information that the customer is asking, right? And there is an immediate response because the information is at your fingertips. So all of these can be orchestrated through an agentic AI and making each of these very modular. And the long term memory, I want to tie back to that, right? There is an episodic memory. The reason I brought this is I start responding to you on some of the offers that you can take. And then you would say, hey, somebody's at the door, I cannot, continue with this call, and you drop off the call. Let's say you come back after a couple of months saying that, hey, this credit card was really important, I should have taken it back then. You come back and call the contact center. Just imagine, I again take you through the entire abyss. You would rather not take the card, right? You would say, hey, can we start from where we left off? I have your personal information. I have your conversation history. I tie the two together and say that, hey, you know what? This person had come to the contact center 3 months ago, and this is exactly what he was looking for, right? And he wants to continue the conversation from there. There's already a platform established. We continue from there, and your experience is heightened now. So the fact that agentic memory is also a part of the agentic architecture, it kind of raises the bar, elevates it to a different platform where the experience is much more better. So therefore, agentic.
Absolutely. This kind of a customer experience would never be possible in case of a customer care call experience where it's an actual person, no matter how good they are at their job, but such memory would not be there if I'm calling 3 months later. And you would often not even get the same person on the call, of course not. But yeah, I think it incredible and very simple way that you have explained agentic AI and AI agents. Now even I know better about them. So next time we make a front page video, I will also be able to explain it better to you guys. Great answer. Thank you so much. Vijay, I want to ask you, you mentioned cost in one of your answers. A very important aspect, obviously. But I want to ask, when it comes to Accenture, how do you guys measure impact, not just on the basis of say cost saving or efficiency, but also, proper on ground change, experience, agility, growth? How do you guys ensure that?
We at Accenture measure impact focusing on 3 areas, as you said: experience, agility, and growth. When we talk about the experience, we measure our customer engagement KPIs through the CSATs and NPS and various other surveys that rolled out to our customers, where we measure how are we doing with respect to that. And when we also measure ourselves, employee engagement KPI through eNPS and also Q12 surveys, we normally roll out on a regular basis across the employees to check the pulse of the employee, and where we measure the people engagement. And we also measure ourselves in terms of vendors and partner engagement through the various surveys. When we talk about the agility, Accenture measures the cycle time and innovation throughput, and also the decision-making speed. These are the areas where we measure our agility. And also when you look out the growth, we look out how much of the revenue we have generated from the digital investments we made. And also we look at our core digital platform where our assets and accelerators are making impact for our client, right? We also look out the improvements we made for the business KPI and outcomes for the client, right? These are the areas where we look at how the impact is made across the organization. And we reinvent ourselves by asking, what did we improve? What did we unlock? And who did we elevate?
Smita, I want to ask you, as you mentioned as well, Accenture has reinvented so many of its own core functions using AI, Gen AI, agentic AI. You've been here 8 months. If you can give us 1 or 2 case studies, and the reason I'm asking you this and not Vijay is because Vijay's been here 15 years. She'll have to really go back into memory to give us case studies, and there'll be so many. But I want to ask you, 8 months, so easier answer than 15 years.
Exactly.
1 or 2 of the case studies as to the work that you and your team did that you're really, really proud of, and even clients were.
Absolutely. So I would take a stab at it in two different paths, right? So one is a reinvention of our own functions, and another is the impact. I think we have multiple impact stories, but I will just bring in one or two of those stories, right? So one of the luxury car manufacturers we associated with, and the three problems that we solved for the manufacturer. So what we call is putting Gen AI at the driver's seat, or putting Gen AI under the hood of the car. That's how we call, this engagement as, and fantastic engagement in the automotive. So there were three problems that we typically solved. One is on the ticket resolution. There are a lot of complaints which are coming in, both from the agents or the dealerships, and also from the customers. So how do I quickly respond to this, right? By creating a knowledge brain at the back of it. So I'm looking at the enterprise data, and all the tickets that were resolved before, and some of the niche tickets. So I'm taking the whole ecosystem of the ticketing and creating a knowledge brain, marrying that with the enterprise data, also talking to the SME, bringing that together. And as the ticket comes in, there's a self-service, right? Hey, this ticket has come in. I look at the similarity of the responses of the previous ticket and say that, hey, this is the resolution for your ticket. So significant reduction in the time with respect to the ticketing. The second and most impactful and very interesting thing is, I just mentioned this is a luxury car manufacturer. So what happens in luxury cars?
Yeah, ever since you mentioned, I'm trying to guess the brand.
So it's almost like order to make, right? You come and place, and it's like order to make. That means you will be surprised. There are 10 million possible combinations that can exist to bring in that kind of a customization, right?
For each car.
For each car,
Wow.
right? So you just come and sit at the dealership, you as a customer, right? And
I hope someday, soon.
I wish and hope, right? So you would come and ask, hey, I want to use this feature, this feature, this feature in my car. There's nothing like standard there, right? And then the dealer would say, hey, you know what? I need some time. I want to get back to you, right? Where is the experience? And the customer is going to wait for long, at least 7 to 10 days, to even know if that combination is possible
or not.
to make it happen in the car, right? Versus today, what we are doing is, we have had multiple interviews with the SMEs, sat with the dealership, trying and understanding the kind of combinations that the customer is asking, and starting to bring that data together with respect to the available parameters and the millions of combinations that you can create. Go back to the SME and tag or annotate, saying that, hey, this is possible, this is not possible, to a level in which the dealership is fully supported on the kind of combinations that they can offer to the customer. Now, as the customer walks in and says that, hey, I want 135, it's just a matter of seconds or minutes. You go back and look at your screen and say that, hey, this is a possible combination, versus I can give you an alternative to this, right? Instead of saying this is not possible, I'll give you an alternative to this. Imagine the customer experience that we have had, right? So this is one such thing that we have solved for the customer. And they had huge code base on Cobalt. Cobalt is like, I don't know, ages. Even when I got into the system, we were not doing Cobalt. So how do we, utilize the Cobalt code and convert them into our Java or Python of today? That is also knowledge, right? So the data is in multiple modalities that we are able to address today, right? Image is a modality, code as a modality. Your entire SDLC or TDLC life cycle is completely handled through GenAI today, right? And then all of these modalities come into picture while answering the customer, right? And now this knowledge which is there in the Cobalt code, you can decipher, extract, make it more current language understood modality, and then take that knowledge also, right, going forward, because enough amount of knowledge has gone into that code base. So how do I make it more relevant for today, right? So these three imperatives, or I would say initiatives, we addressed for these luxury car brand, and actually made it an adapted initiative for the customers through the GenAI. This is for the customer, right? How did we bring a reinvention within our organization itself? I think me and Vijay, we both spoke about the marketing reinvention, right? So one of our flagship, I would say, within Accenture for that. There what happened is entire campaign management, right? Now it is so much autonomous that earlier to launch a campaign, it used to take months. Now we can actually decipher the whole campaign management in matter of days, I would say, right? There are two deliverables in a campaign management. You are in the whole business, so you know this better. So what are those deliverables? One is writing a strategic brief, and the other one is when to activate this campaign.
Correct.
Right? So what happens in a strategic brief? Why do I need this campaign? What my competitors are doing in this campaign, right? And did I launch any campaign of this modality before?
Yeah.
What learnings can I get from those campaigns? And were there different other organizations, may not be competitors, but different other organizations who have launched a similar campaign, and what channels give me the best adoption for this campaign? So all of these come as part of the strategic brief, right? And then when you want to activate a campaign, when is the right time to activate the campaign, right? How do I make sure that I'm not cannibalizing my own campaign by activating it at a wrong time? Also, I wouldn't get resources to work on this campaign if I activate a similar campaign back to back, right? And your viewership will also be low, whether viewership or adoption, whatever the nature of the campaign, right? So these are the two deliverables that we addressed through a fully agentic AI. So you have an analyst, you have a researcher who goes and does all the research and gets it for you, and you have a strategic brief writer. After all the research is done, the brief has to be written in a certain pattern, right? So that is written. So earlier, what used to happen, you had to have an SME to launch a campaign, right? Now, a just graduated person with less than 2 years of experience has the same level of knowledge at his or her fingertips to write a strategic brief. Isn't that fantastic? Right? So you're reducing the entire workflow time to matter of days. And then you can launch more and more campaigns and start experimenting on the campaigns better. So it has raised the whole platform to a different level. So these are the two reinventions that I wanted to call out through GenAI.
Amazing case studies, especially the car customization request example that you gave off. I mean, I can only imagine, just think about you going to your tailor chacha and telling exactly the customization you want in your kurta, but this happens in the case of a car. So amazing. Can you tell us the name of the brand, of the luxury brand?
See, you are a well-trained, what do I say, prompt engineer. I am a well-trained GenAI model with guardrails. So,
Love that example. Love that example. Lovely. Vijay, I want to ask you, at Davos itself, partnerships were a recurring theme constantly throughout. How important are ecosystems during these times, when it comes to across cloud, data, talent, in making this kind of organizational reinvention real?
Yeah, so the partnership and ecosystem partnerships are no more an optional. It's a mission critical. Whether it is a cloud or a data or a talent, we always tap into our partner's strength and take the best out of it, right? So our research says nearly 99% of the companies, they feel that their technological ecosystem as their strategic partners, right? So when it comes to the cloud, Accenture has a lot of partnership with the providers like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform to reinvent and then create a co-created reinvention and delivering faster innovation to the world, right? And also there are companies who tries to leverage a lot of data sets, working with all these partnership to make it real for the engagements, right? When you talk about the data, Accenture has got a lot of data sharing partnership with various industries like healthcare or the sustainability, because one single player cannot have the full picture of the entire industry, right? There is a reason why we tap into the partnership to leverage the full potential, right? When it comes to the talent, ecosystem is our capability in extensions, right? We work with various learning platforms, gig networks, and other startups, and also even competitors to enable our future ready skills faster and quicker.
Smita, Vijay in her answer mentioned that Accenture for decades now has been working across industries, so many different genres, so many different organizations. I want to ask you, how does an effective collaboration happen between, say, tech companies, governments, and enterprises? How does that look like in practice?
Yeah. I would say, the industries which actually develop and make the technology real are or should be tied at the hip with the governments, right? So So what is the enablement for the private organizations? That's how I'm taking the cue, right? The private organizations are having good financial investments, they have great talent in house, or they have the ability to create the talent base in house, right? And they have a consumer ecosystem as well, and they have infrastructure too to support everything, right? And they have researchers along with them, and they also have the risk appetite taking mindset and all of that. So what do these companies do? They make these inventions real, right? So that is what the private organizations do. But what do the governments do, right? They look at these inventions and reinventions and try and create a sustainable ecosystem, right? How do I make sure that the technology is used in the right way? For that, I need to provide guardrails, right? I don't want to marginalize already marginalized population. Let's say that, right? A very classic case study was, when a cardiac arrest was studied, right? It always came as an outcome that, men were more prone to cardiac arrest compared to women. But is that reality? We
Is there
just
not?
had data in that fashion, right? It so happened that the data collected was more from
Men.
male gender
So it was biased data.
than, yes, so from a female gender. So this is where the government comes in, right? Who looks at the data agnostic to any particular bias, and give an angle of diversification and create policies so that the technology is used in the right fashion, right? So can you identify bias? Can you identify toxicity, right? Can you identify unfairness that is happening? Just because you have a data of that nature doesn't mean that you start utilizing the exact same thing, codify it, and amplify all the problems that is already existing, right? So this is where the government comes in, and then that's where I said we have to be tied close to the hip, and different cross functions have to work together in unison to make sure what we are developing is abiding the policies set by the government. And what are the intentions of the government? Is to make sure this democratized technology is used with proper guardrails, right? And we don't amplify the problem that we already have. So therefore, governments play a very significant role. One, in creating sustainability. Two, in creating scale as well, right? So if somebody has to take this information and magnify it for a population like India, what are the repercussions? Those are kind of addressed by the policymakers, and therefore we find the policies to be in place. And I think it's a very good handshake of sorts. And this is where I see the two intersections making a T junction.
You've been in the field for so long now, as we discussed, long before AI was sexy. How is the industry dealing with hallucinations? How is the industry dealing with, say, jailbreaking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So even before the advent or the hype of Gen AI, right? Natural language processing was, like I said earlier, was able to handle a lot of conversations, right? And there were many predictions which were happening as well. So hallucination started from that era, not just now. So if you can recollect some of the cases which had breaches, right?
Gemini.
Not just data breaches,
Many, huh?
also in terms of the concept breaches
Or hallucinations in answers.
Hallucination, right? So there was a huge study that was done. This is very industry public case studies, so that you can always go and refer. So what happened was, there was a predictive model that came into picture, where can I actually see the outcome of this case, right? And when you started predicting that, most of the times it came out to be true, right? And then when you started going and actually looking at it, there was a pattern of the people who are passing the judgments, right? So that became a privacy concern, right? My complete behavior is studied by somebody, right? That became a privacy concern. And recent days, right, on the Gen AI, when the argument happens, right, if the lawyer is looking at the narrative coming out of some of the models and present that narrative, saying that this is part of the clause in the law book or something, right? It is presented with so much conviction that unless you really look, or if you're a judge who really knows the clauses well in your law book, you will be so tempted to accept that. because the acceptance of the models due to their conversational nature has become so high when compared to an actual human expertise, I would say, very unfortunately. So all of these lead to multiple hallucinations, and there has to be a lot of I would say guardrails that needs to be set. And it's not a one time affair, right? Once you have set the guardrails, I'm done with it. No, your data would, the nature of your data would change, the kind of products that we use would change, right? So how, what is the frequency at which I have to revisit? Can you set some of the parameters that you will measure with time and say that, hey, I have a drift in this parameter, let me go back and check? So these become important. So these technologies are not one time done kind of a thing. You have to constantly revisit and make sure today it's hallucination, tomorrow it's something, right? So having the guardrails is, I can't stress enough, is extremely important.
Vijay, I want to ask you, when it comes to organizations reinventing, how important it is to embed responsibility, but while ensuring that innovation is not slowed down.
So, GenAI at scale, it's not only the technical leap, it's an ethical one, right? Accenture led conversation with multiple companies. What it indicates, they're already discussing how to navigate the complex terrain of GenAI with considering the governance and fairness and also the sustainability, right? When we talk about the governance, Accenture has got a strong responsible AI framework which will help in ensuring the explainability, auditability, and also fairness and transparency is there in every model it generates the outcome, right? So leaders are already embedding GenAI governance as part of their DNA, right? So they're also building a lot of data sets to ensure that it tests all the scenarios, and also cross-functional review boards and a continuous bias testing undergoes so that the model produces the fair and unbiased output as part of the deliverable, right? So when you talk about the fairness, Accenture feels the trust is non-negotiable. To ensure that every model we generate, it undergoes rigorous guardrail testing to outcomes are produced ethically, right? When you talk about the sustainability, we all know GenAI is a compute intensive, right? Companies already looking at, especially the forward looking companies, looking at how to save the energy, how to bring in the green energy strategies while implementing their GenAI across enterprise at scale, right? And as Smita said, having a GenAI at scale without guardrails, it's like a racing without brake, right? So, and also to ensure that we are building the right models and which is producing the right outcomes are super critical when we work with our clients, because trust, transparency, and responsibility are the non-negotiable for our client.
We're almost towards the end of the podcast. I just have one question left for you guys. Smita, no better person than you to ask this question. You've been in the field for so long now. What is the one area where you expect to see the next big wave of reinvention?
Okay. So this I always think while I am alone and contemplate whether this or not. So I don't come from a very biology or a medical field per se, but I've always had an intriguing interest in this field, right? So I'm a very technologist by heart, right? But some of the reinventions that are coming in, I couldn't even imagine. So in our free time, we read a lot of papers and we do some research pertaining to our field and all of that. So one of the recent, article that I was reading is where, in synthetic biology and gene editing, right? So what happens in gene editing is, by actually knowing the DNA of a person, if there is a disease that has already manifested, right, you can figure out the treatments based on the gene. So very personalized treatments for a gene type, right? And not just that, you can go back and edit the genes so that they don't manifest again. Because we have heard multiple times, right? So if there is a cancer episode, likely chances that it might come back even after remission and things like that. So that is one area which can really go big, is what I'm thinking.
Gene editing?
Gene editing.
Did you guys see the news that with the technology of gene editing and protein synthesis, scientists, a firm in US, brought back dire wolves who had become extinct 13,000 years back. 3 of those dire wolves have been brought back. They have gotten born again as dire wolves through the technology of gene editing. Did you guys check it out?
I don't know if that's something wise to do, if something is already extinct or not, but that's a debatable topic. But it's definitely exciting. I would only keep it to my opinion, right? It's definitely exciting. Yes, I have read that article, right? And another thing is, while doing the gene editing itself, some of the benefits is, if you had a manifested gene from your ancestors, which where you are probably anybody susceptible to fibric cystosis or sickle cell anemia, right? You can go and actually change the gene through the editing so that you are no more prone to those kind of diseases. That is fantastic to me, right? And have you heard of something called as designer organisms? Have you heard of this?
No.
So, 3D printing?
Yes.
Okay. So, this is an analogy to it. Think of it like that, right? Some microbes are created to actually form the tissues of organs, right? For me, it was so profound when I actually read this article. You can actually create organs such as heart, right? And liver and kidneys. So, what happens when you do this, right? You don't wait for a transplant to happen, right? You already have an organ which can support your body, readily available. These are like, mammoth reinventions, if you ask me. And this kind of keeps intriguing me. I don't know how far this can be reality with time, but the way in which the technology is evolving, and if this happens in the next few years to come, I am not surprised. So these are technology put to use for the right initiatives, I would say. Of course, therefore, the government is required to bring in all the sustainable guardrails and policies and things like that. See, we have to make all of these easy for us, right? I would say we have to be partner with the government, right? So have somebody who can sit with the government and influence the policymakers to make these happen at a faster speed, because we see from an industry standpoint and they see from a social standpoint.
Correct.
So how can we tie the two together, for your prior question, and bring in that reinvention at a faster pace, is we being in the brotherlyhood mentality, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Guys, last 2 questions for the two of you, and no better people to ask these questions to than you guys. You've been industry leaders for so long. You yourself at Accenture for 15 years now. If one has to ask you a piece of advice for youngsters joining industries right now, or joining Accenture right now for that matter, what will that advice be?
I would say not to chase the technology, but chase the value, right? While GenAI, cloud, and data are super critical skills to learn, but the value you need to look at is how to bring those knowledge and tools and technology and applying in the real world problem, drive the outcome, and do it with a purpose and do it responsibly.
Amazing. What an
And
answer.
I would also want to conclude that be curious, stay adaptable, and think responsibly, and always think fair.
Lovely. That's a great piece of advice. Don't chase the technology, chase the value. Amazing. Lovely, Vijay. Smita, a piece of advice for youngsters joining industries right now. Maybe coders, maybe software developers, maybe want to be founders, want to be entrepreneurs, who want to build something in the country in the field of tech and AI, build in India, take it to the world. What will that advice be?
Great. To add to what Vijay said, I agree with everything that she said. And to add to what Vijay said, I would say know your diverse learning mechanisms, right? So if I want to learn a technology ever, right, I just don't do my learning through one mode or one mechanism. I would go and refer to multiple, the MOOC courses that are offered, and then I would come back and read humongous number of papers that is there in the area where I want to learn. Take the data from those papers, put it to a practical use, and start looking at start having a touch and feel kind of a thing, right? So that is one way to learn. The other way to learn is talking to people. So, great people of the world, they say, don't make friends who are exactly like you, right? We more tend to do that. So, look at people, how they are learning. Look at people who are very diverse from the way you are. So, that is where we kind of, raise the bar, right? I would say learnability is a very important skill, and you should never retire from learning. And the second thing is be humble. There's always a person in the room who knows better than you, right? So, be humble, be responsible, and I would also say be accountable. From the newer generations, what we are seeing is they're super smart. Just being super smart is not going to be contributive enough. How are you changing the entire society through your smartness paired with the technology that is there, right? So being accountable, humble is very important. Even at Accenture, when we are hiring, we don't just hire for a skill or for a technology or for your smartness. We see how collaborative you are in terms of the answers that you are giving. What is your learning capability? You might not know that skill today, but given 2 months, where would you be? So, these are some of the things that we actually gauge when we are hiring people. And we as leaders never stop learning, right? And we learn through you as well, through the younger generations as well. So it has to be, a mutual learning mechanism. So figure out the different ways in which we can learn and elevate what we know. And don't be the smartest person in the room, because you will never be. Be humble, be accountable. That's how I say.
Lovely pieces of advice, and so many pieces of advice, not just for techies, but all encompassing. Doesn't matter which genre you are in, these pieces of advice will help. Smita, Vijay, thank you so much. It was such a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I'm dead sure our viewers feel the same way about it as well. How was the chat for you?
I think it was very different. I mean, before we started, I said this is my first ever podcast, right? You are such a wonderful host. You never made us feel very intimidated by all the cameras around, and I really enjoyed the experience.
Thank you so much, Smita. Vijay, how is it for you?
Yeah, you have been an amazing person. Yeah, so I echo whatever Smita said. It's a very different experience, I would say. Yeah, it's our first podcast also for me. It's wonderful working with you, and also a lot of conversation we had. Nice knowing you.
Same here, absolutely. I am so glad that the first ever podcast for the two of you happened here at AIM and with me. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Guys, do tell us in the comments, how did you enjoy this podcast? Share it with a fellow techie as well. And for more such exclusive content like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on AIM TV. This is me, your friend Korak. I will see you in the next one. Till then, think AI, think AIM.